the crowds at the Swamp week to week versus the crowds at Penn State, it's a much harder place to play in the Swamp than it is Penn State. You only have to fear them one time a year, to be completely honest with you. Nobody fears going into playing Penn State unless it's the whiteout game. And still, I think we can kind of say that that's kind of being overrated. In the Swamp, it's always damn near sold out every damn week of the season. What's the best job between Penn State and Florida? Well, I got a lot of thoughts on that, and I'm leaning one way, and it kind of hurts my soul to talk about it. So, a couple weeks ago, James Franklin loses his job at Penn State. Drew Aller breaks his ankle. Then they're dealing with the transfer portal happening the way that it did, wherein 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝗶𝗲𝘀𝘀 is doing so well with Missouri. They get 3 transfer wide receivers in. Both of their star running backs come in. 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝗀𝗀𝗀's into his, I believe, his second year. They go and get Jim Knowles. Their whole offensive line comes back. They're waiting for guys to step up on that defense. And then they hit a skid where they're losing to UCLA and Northwestern. Crazy stuff has happened. Regardless of how you feel about James Franklin and his tenureship there, it's no need to argue this anymore. He is gone. Then you look at Florida's side, right? Just to kind of give a recap, Billy Napier did what he did at Louisiana, worked his way up. They call him Sunbelt Billy for a reason, right? G5 Billy, whatever you want to call him. And comes into Florida, does what he does, has Anthony Richardson as his first quarterback. Has a couple of quarterbacks after that, then eventually lands on DJ Lagway due to, just the other quarterback getting injured last year. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank on his name, a Wisconsin transfer. DJ Lagway looks good, and a lot of people at the beginning of the season are like, my goodness, this dude is going to be a Heisman candidate. They're going to win a national championship. And then the downfall of that happens. They lose a couple games that they shouldn't lose, and then he wins against Mississippi State this past weekend and continues to lose his job in the whole grand scheme of things. So where do we land with all this? Well, if I had to be completely honest with you, the better job is the Florida Gators job. Look, there's no better rivalries than what Florida has, especially when the state of Florida is good. And, we'll get into Penn State's rivals or rivalry games, the two top ones, as they say. But the two top, rivalry games are in the state of Florida. And then if you want to say one that's bigger than that, the rivalry against Georgia, where they play a neutral site game at Jacksonville's Everbank Stadium. The Florida State versus Florida, Miami versus Florida rivalry games are high sellers anywhere you go. It's a game that you pay attention to regardless of how bad those two teams suck. And even the Georgia-Florida game. Now, when Penn State goes up against guys like Ohio State, they have a history of losing to Ohio State, Michigan, and then their other rivals, Pittsburgh. That's even if that's on their schedule to play that year, right? And so the rivalry games, in a nutshell, they have a rivalry against Syracuse. Like, these games do not amount to the pressure that Florida goes and gets year to year. The one thing that they look forward to is their whiteout game, right? Their whiteout game is okay, depending on who they schedule. We've had Auburn in the past. We've had a couple other teams, most recently Oregon, which they lost. And so their whiteout game has not been known to be the best game ever in this whole scheme of things. And so, if you look at it in that aspect, it's actually been very, very, very disappointing in the grand scheme of things. So Florida is, of course, the better job. And if you want to get into kind of the nitty gritty of things, Florida's warm weather versus cold. If you ever been up to State College, it gets cold up there. I live in the state of Pennsylvania. It gets cold up here, man. Not as cold as a Buffalo, but you're going to get your fair share of snow. then you got to navigate throughout that, and then you have to play all these northern schools too. You got to go play Ohio State when it's cold. You got to go play Michigan, Northwestern, Wisconsin. The list just goes on and on and on. So your schedule doesn't favor you, and then you have to travel. Now that USC and UCLA and those teams are in Oregon, Washington, you got to go play those teams on the West Coast. The other upside is the Florida recruits. If you don't know, there's 3 states that are known as the big 3 when it comes to recruiting. These are the schools that you want to recruit over and over and over if you can. Some of the best talent comes from there. Texas is being one of them, California is being the other, and Florida is the other one. Those are the big 3. And if you can't recruit well in those states, especially if you're some of these southern schools or schools within those regions, and then you have Georgia right there, who's another hotbed, and Louisiana, who's across the way, and Alabama, who's across the way, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee. Penn State is not recruiting those schools. They're recruiting New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, of course, maybe Ohio, maybe Maryland. Pennsylvania is a hotbed in its own, but it's not any of these big 3s. I would even say Georgia and Louisiana are probably bigger hotbeds than Pennsylvania is in a lot of aspects of things. So you have that. And then if you're a coach, what's appealing is just how Scott Strickland has dealt with the adversity and the leash that he gave Billy Napier during his whole tenureship. You have a athletic director that's going to work with you when the times get low. He's going to stick by you until he can't stick by you anymore. I'm not sure if the next coach is going to get that long of a leash, but it is nice to know that the powers that be are willing to work with guys like a Billy Napier for so long and stand behind your guy regardless win, lose, or draw. And then eventually he was just forced to pull the plug. But that's also got to be appealing, that they're going to be patient while you try to build this thing from the ground up. Not sure how Penn State is going to deal with that, since, James Franklin was such a great recruit that he was able to bring in and kind of patch up that school, but it came off the back of guys like Bill O'Brien coming in there and doing what they did after that whole debacle with Joe Paterno and Jerry Sandusky, right? Also, I think stadium-wise, the crowds at the Swamp week to week versus the crowds at Penn State, it's a much harder place to play in the Swamp than it is Penn State. You only have to fear them one time a year, to be completely honest with you. Nobody fears going into playing Penn State unless it's the whiteout game. And still, I think we can kind of say that that's kind of being overrated. In the Swamp, it's always damn near sold out every damn week of the season. And so, girls have how bad their teams have sucked too. So you have that. Then I guess the last thing is, because Florida's had success with so many different coaches, that yes, they expect the next guy to come in and be great, right? But the comparisons that get made to Joe Paterno at Penn State have to set on the shoulders of you, and it's just a high bar to meet. These schools are very similar in a lot of aspects, but they're also so different in what is appealing to be coaching at one or the other. I don't think it's a debate here. I've been seeing this conversation going around for a very long time. Not a very long time, but ever since James Franklin got fired and Billy Napier got let go, it's been the constant back and forth discussions on which school is going to be better to coach at or what's the better job. And I'm here to tell you, Florida overall, it's almost a clean sweep that Florida is the better job at this point in time, just by everything that I said. So, yeah, and Elijah agrees with me. Florida is the better job.